Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that's probably sitting on a gas station shelf right next to the energy drinks and scratchers. Kratom. Not the ancient herbal remedy your wellness influencer swears by. Not the harmless plant supplement the internet promised would cure your everything. I mean the actual Kratom epidemic that's turning corner stores into unregulated opioid dispensaries and Americans into accidental addicts, one herbal shot at a time. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Shout out to the viewers who suggested this topic in the comments. You knew this was worth diving into. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, what time it is for you, and what topic I should cover next. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, get comfortable, and maybe check your local 7-Eleven supplement aisle so you know exactly what we're talking about. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how a Southeast Asian tree leaf became America's legal opioid replacement? How did something banned in its country of origin end up in gas stations next to beef jerky? What happens when you can buy opioid-adjacent substances more easily than you can buy Sudafed? Could a plant that's been used ceremonially for centuries actually be destroying lives when it's mass-produced, concentrated and sold in 2-ounce shots with names like MIT45 and OPMS Gold? Would you know if your teenager bought one thinking it was just an energy drink? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in modern America where Kratom is legal in 44 states, being marketed as a dietary supplement, sold without age restrictions in thousands of stores, and creating a public health crisis that nobody's talking about. The year is 2025. You have a headache. Someone hands you a small bottle with a leaf on it, and you have absolutely no idea what you're about to start. Good luck. Let's start with the basics, because if you're like most Americans, you've either never heard of Kratom or you think it's some trendy superfood that influencers put in their smoothies. Kratom comes from a tree called Mitragyna speciosa, native to Southeast Asia, specifically Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia. For centuries, farmers and labourers in these regions chewed the leaves to fight fatigue during long days in the fields. It was traditional, localised and most importantly controlled by culture and custom. The leaves contain alkaloids, primarily mitragyne and 7-hydroxymitragyne, which interact with opioid receptors in the brain. At low doses, it acts like a stimulant. At high doses, it mimics opioids. And here's the kicker, it's completely legal in most of the United States, sold as a dietary supplement with 0 FDA approval, 0 regulation, and 0 quality control. So yes, you can walk into a gas station and buy a substance that hits the same brain receptors as oxycodone. Welcome to America, where we banned Kinder eggs, but not this. The tree itself looks innocent enough. Big green leaves, tropical climate, nothing sinister about it. In its native regions, workers would pluck a few leaves, chew them like tobacco, and get a mild energy boost. Think of it like coffee, but from a leaf instead of a bean. The effects were manageable because the dose was controlled by nature. You couldn't exactly overdose by chewing leaves unless you had the jaw strength of a determined beaver and several hours to spare. But here's where things get interesting. Those 2 alkaloids we mentioned, they're the active ingredients, the chemical compounds that make Kratom do what it does. Mitragyne is the primary one, making up about 66% of the alkaloid content in most Kratom leaves. It's what gives you that stimulant effect at low doses. 7-hydroxymitragyne is less abundant but significantly more potent, about 13 times stronger in its ability to bind to opioid receptors. That's the one that gives you the opioid-like effects, pain relief, sedation, euphoria. Now, when Southeast Asian farmers were chewing leaves, they were getting a balanced mix of these alkaloids in relatively small amounts. It was like having a cup of strong tea, manageable, predictable, not particularly dangerous. But then Western supplement companies got their hands on it and thought, you know what would make this better? If we concentrated the hell out of it, turned it into powder, packaged it in capsules and sold it next to the beef jerky, and that's exactly what they did. Today, Kratom in America comes in multiple forms: raw leaf powder, capsules, tablets, tinctures, and concentrated liquid extracts. Each form has different potency levels, and none of them are standardized. You could buy 2 bottles of the same brand and get wildly different alkaloid concentrations. It's like playing Russian roulette, but instead of bullets, you're gambling with your opioid receptors. The most dangerous part? People assume that because it's legal and sold in stores, someone must be making sure it's safe. That's how we think about medications, right? The FDA tests them, approves them, monitors them. But Kratom? Nope. It's classified as a dietary supplement, which means it falls into the same regulatory category as vitamins and protein powder. Companies can sell it without proving it's safe, without disclosing exact alkaloid content, and without any real oversight. As long as they don't make explicit medical claims on the label, they're in the clear. And that's how we ended up here, with a plant that acts on the same brain receptors as heroin, sold legally in 44 states, marketed as wellness, and treated like it's no more dangerous than green tea. Spoiler alert, it's a lot more dangerous than green tea. Walk into any mid-tier gas station in America, your local 7-Eleven, Circle K, or some fluorescent lit convenience store off the highway, and you'll find them. Rows of small bottles with names like MIT45 OPMS liquid and K-shot. Bright packaging, bold claims, and absolutely no indication that what you're holding is a concentrated opioid-like substance. They're marketed as energy boosters, mood enhancers, or herbal supplements, sitting right next to 5-hour energy and vitamin water. No age verification. No warnings, no prescription needed. In fact, you'll find Kratom in more places than you'd find legitimate pain medication. It's in smoke shops, health food stores, online retailers, and yes, next to the Slim Jims. The Kratom industry is now worth over $1 billion annually in the United States alone, and it's growing fast. But here's the thing nobody's putting on the label. These aren't just dried leaves anymore. These are highly concentrated extracts, sometimes 50 times stronger than traditional Kratom, packed into 2-ounce bottles and sold for $15 to $30 a pop. It's convenience store opioids, and business is booming. The packaging is designed to look appealing, almost innocuous. Bright colours, botanical imagery, words like pure, premium, and organic plastered everywhere. Some bottles have leaves on them. Others have abstract designs that look like they belong on an energy drink. The aesthetic screams wellness and natural health, not opioid receptor agonist that can cause physical dependence. And the placement is strategic. Kratom products are displayed at eye level near the checkout counter, right where you'd see candy bars or lottery tickets. They're positioned as impulse purchases, something you grab on your way out after paying for gas. The entire setup is designed to normalize the purchase, to make it feel as casual as buying a pack of gum. Here's what makes this particularly insidious. There's no consultation, no pharmacist, no one asking why you're buying it, or whether you understand what it does. You just grab a bottle, pay and leave. A teenager could do it. A person in active addiction could do it. Someone with no idea what Kratom even is could do it. And they do, every single day, in thousands of gas stations across America. The profit margins are staggering. A 2-ounce bottle of concentrated Kratom extract retails for $20 to $30. The cost to produce it? Probably a few dollars at most. Gas station owners love it because it's legal, popular, and insanely profitable. They don't need to worry about liquor licenses or prescription tracking. They just stock the shelves and watch it sell. And it does sell. Fast. Some stores report that Kratom products move faster than energy drinks. Users come in daily, sometimes multiple times a day. buying bottles like clockwork. Store owners notice the repeat customers but don't ask questions. Why would they? It's legal, it's profitable, and if something goes wrong, well, that's not their problem. The industry has also gotten clever about branding. They avoid anything that sounds too medical or too drug-like. You won't see phrases like pain relief or opioid alternative on the packaging, because that would trigger FDA scrutiny. Instead, you get vague wellness language, mood support, natural energy, botanical extract. It's legally protected ambiguity, designed to suggest benefits without making claims. Some brands market themselves as premium or artisanal, charging higher prices and using sleeker packaging to appeal to a more upscale demographic. Others go for the bargain approach, offering cheaper options in bulk. There's a Kratom product for every price point, every aesthetic preference, every type of customer. It's a full-blown industry with distribution networks, wholesalers and marketing teams. It's not some underground operation, it's corporate. And the craziest part, most people buying these products have no idea what they're actually getting. They see herbal supplement and think it's harmless. They don't know about opioid receptors or alkaloid concentrations or withdrawal syndromes. They just know someone told them it helps with energy or anxiety, and it's sitting right there on the counter, legal and available, so they buy it. And that's how the epidemic spreads, one gas station transaction at a time. To understand how Kratom exploded in America, you have to understand the opioid crisis. By the 2010s, America was drowning in prescription painkillers. OxyContin, Vicodin, fentanyl, doctors handed them out like candy, and pharmaceutical companies made billions while people died. Then came the crackdown, prescriptions tightened, pill mills shut down, and millions of Americans who had become physically dependent on opioids were suddenly cut off. Enter Kratom. It wasn't regulated, it wasn't illegal, and it promised relief. People in chronic pain, people withdrawing from opioids, people desperate for anything that worked, they turned to Kratom. At first, it seemed like a miracle. Online forums lit up with testimonials. Kratom saved my life. I quit heroin with Kratom. It's natural, it's safe, it's legal. But what started as a harm reduction tool quickly became something else entirely. Companies saw an opportunity. They industrialized it, concentrated it, and marketed it not as medicine but as lifestyle. Suddenly Kratom wasn't just for recovering addicts, it was for anyone who wanted energy, focus, or a little buzz. And because it was legal, unregulated, and sold everywhere, it spread like wildfire. Let's rewind a bit. In the early 2000s, pharmaceutical companies pushed opioids aggressively. They funded studies downplaying addiction risks, trained sales reps to reassure doctors, and convinced the medical community that pain was being undertreated. Prescriptions skyrocketed. People got hooked. Addiction rates soared. Overdose deaths climbed year after year. It was a public health catastrophe, and it was entirely man-made. By 2010, the backlash began. States implemented prescription monitoring programs. The CDC issued guidelines discouraging long-term opioid use for chronic pain. Doctors, terrified of losing their licenses or facing lawsuits, started cutting patients off, sometimes gradually, often abruptly. People who had been on opioids for years suddenly found themselves with no prescriptions, no refills, and no alternatives. The pain didn't go away. The dependence didn't go away. But the pills did. So what do you do when you're in pain, physically dependent on opioids, and your doctor just cut you off? You find an alternative, and Kratom was right there, legal and accessible. Online communities dedicated to harm reduction and opioid recovery started discussing Kratom as a potential solution. People shared dosing guides, vendor recommendations, and success stories. For many it worked. Kratom eased withdrawal symptoms, reduced cravings, and provided some pain relief. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The problem? Kratom is also habit-forming. It activates the same opioid receptors, it causes tolerance, it leads to dependence. People who use Kratom to get off opioids often found themselves addicted to Kratom instead. They'd traded one dependency for another, and because Kratom was legal and natural, they didn't see it as a problem. They thought they were in recovery when really they were just using a different substance. Meanwhile, supplement companies saw dollar signs. Kratom wasn't just for addicts anymore. It could be marketed to everyone. Got anxiety? Try Kratom. Need energy? Try Kratom. Chronic pain? Kratom. They positioned it as a catch-all wellness product, a natural solution to modern stress and discomfort. And Americans, exhausted and desperate for relief, bought in. The timing was perfect. The wellness industry was booming. People were turning away from pharmaceuticals and toward natural alternatives. Turmeric, CBD, adaptogens, anything that promised benefits without a prescription was hot. Kratom fit right in. It was exotic, plant-based, and shrouded in just enough mystery to feel special. And so Kratom went mainstream. What started as a niche harm reduction tool used by recovering addicts became a billion-dollar industry sold to stressed-out office workers, tired parents, and teenagers looking for a legal high. The opioid crisis created the demand. The supplement industry supplied the product, and nobody in charge did anything to stop it. Kratom's effects aren't magic, they're chemistry. The two main alkaloids in Kratom, Mitragyna and 7-hydroxymitragynine, bind to the same opioid receptors in your brain that morphine, heroin and fentanyl do. At low doses, 1 to 5 grams, Kratom acts as a stimulant. You feel energized, focused, sociable. It's why labourers in Thailand used it to work longer hours. But at higher doses, 5 to 15 grams or more, it flips. It becomes sedating, euphoric and pain-relieving basically. It mimics opioids. And here's where it gets dangerous. Those concentrated extracts sold at gas stations. They're dosing you at opioid levels right out of the gate. Your brain starts depending on those receptors being activated. You build tolerance. You need more. And when you try to stop, you go through withdrawal, sweating, nausea, muscle aches, anxiety, insomnia, all the classics. People think because it's natural and legal, it's safe. But your brain doesn't care about marketing. It just knows it's hooked. Let's break down what happens in your brain when you take Kratom. Your brain has 3 main types of opioid receptors: mu, delta, and kappa. These receptors are part of your body's natural pain and reward systems. When you experience pain, your brain releases endorphins, which bind to these receptors and reduce suffering. When you experience pleasure, eating, sex, social bonding, these same systems light up, reinforcing behaviors that promote survival. Kratom alkaloids, particularly 7-hydroxymitragynine, bind primarily to mu-opioid receptors. These are the same receptors activated by prescription painkillers and street opioids. When these receptors are activated, they trigger a cascade of effects: pain reduction, euphoria, sedation, and respiratory depression at high doses. Your brain floods with dopamine, you feel good, really good, and your brain remembers. Here's the problem. Your brain is designed to maintain balance, a state called homeostasis. When you repeatedly activate opioid receptors with external substances, your brain adapts. It downregulates receptor production, meaning it makes fewer receptors available. It also reduces natural endorphin production because, hey, why bother making your own when you're getting it from a plant? This is tolerance. You need more Kratom to achieve the same effect because your brain has literally changed its structure to compensate. What started as 3 grams becomes 5, then 10, then 20. Some users report taking 30 to 50 grams per day just to feel normal, not even to get high. And then there's dependence. Once your brain has adapted to regular kratom use, it can't function normally without it. Your natural endorphin system is suppressed. Your receptor density is reduced. When you stop taking kratom, your brain goes haywire. You're left with an imbalanced system that's screaming for the substance it's come to rely on. Withdrawal sets in fast, sometimes within hours of your last dose. The symptoms mirror opioid withdrawal: intense anxiety, muscle aches, sweating, chills, nausea, diarrhea, insomnia, and restless legs. Your body physically hurts, your mood crashes. You can't sleep, but you're exhausted. You're irritable, depressed, and desperate for relief. The only thing that makes it stop? More kratom. This is the cycle. Use, tolerance, dependence, withdrawal, more use. It's the same pattern as any opioid, just with a different origin story. And because kratom is sold as a supplement, users don't see it coming. They think they're taking an herbal remedy, not training their brain to become dependent on an external opioid source. The dual-action nature of kratom makes it even trickier. At low doses, it's stimulating, so people use it like coffee. But as tolerance builds, they need higher doses, which flip the effect to sedation. Now they're not using it for energy. They're using it to avoid withdrawal and to feel sedated. The original purpose is gone, replaced by compulsion. And here's the real kicker. There's no safe dose. Because kratom isn't standardized, you never know exactly how much of each alkaloid you're getting. One batch might be weak, the next might be incredibly potent. You're constantly adjusting, guessing, hoping you got the dose right. It's pharmacological roulette, and your brain is the target. One of kratom's biggest selling points is that it's natural. Marketers plaster it all over packaging. All natural botanical, pure plant extract, nature's remedy. And Americans eat it up because we've been conditioned to believe that natural equals safe. But here's a reality check. So is arsenic. So is cyanide. So is tobacco. The word natural means absolutely nothing when it comes to safety. Kratom companies know this, and they exploit it ruthlessly. They avoid making medical claims, because that would invite FDA scrutiny, but they heavily imply benefits, energy, pain relief, mood enhancement, focus. They use earthy, wellness-coded branding, leaves, green tones, phrases like botanical wellness and ancient remedy. It's the same playbook used by the supplement industry for decades, and it works. People assume that because it's sold legally in stores, someone must have tested it. Someone must have approved it, but no one has. The FDA has issued warnings. The DEA has tried and failed to ban it. But the kratom lobby is powerful, and the industry is worth too much money to go down without a fight. Let's talk about the psychology of natural. We've been culturally conditioned to associate natural products with purity, safety, and wholesomeness. Organic food, herbal medicine, essential oils, the entire wellness industry is built on this association. And it's not entirely baseless. Many natural substances do have therapeutic benefits. But the leap from some natural things are good to all natural things are safe is where the logic falls apart. Kratom marketers exploit this cognitive bias relentlessly. They use imagery of lush forests, pristine leaves, and traditional Southeast Asian culture to create an aura of authenticity and safety. The packaging often features green and earth tones, botanical illustrations, and phrases like sustainably harvested or ethically sourced. It looks wholesome, it feels trustworthy, and that's exactly the point. But here's what the packaging doesn't tell you. Natural substances can be incredibly dangerous. Deadly nightshade is natural. Hemlock is natural. Opium poppies are natural. The fact that something grows in the ground doesn't make it safe. It just means it grows in the ground. Kratom companies also lean heavily on the ancient remedy narrative. They'll reference centuries of traditional use in Southeast Asia, implying that if it's been used for that long, it must be safe. But traditional use and modern use are radically different. Traditional users in Thailand chewed fresh leaves in moderate amounts for specific purposes. They weren't downing concentrated extracts multiple times a day from gas station bottles. Context matters. The marketing also benefits from intentional vagueness. Because Kratom is sold as a dietary supplement under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, companies can't make explicit medical claims. They can't say cures pain or treats opioid addiction, but they can say things like supports wellness, promotes comfort, or enhances mood. These phrases suggest benefits without legally claiming them, and consumers fill in the blanks with their own hopes and needs. Another tactic, testimonials. Kratom websites and social media pages are flooded with user reviews praising the product. Changed my life. Best decision I ever made. Finally, something that works. These testimonials are powerful because they're relatable and emotional. They create social proof, the idea that if so many people say it works, it must be legitimate. But what you don't see are the testimonials from people who became dependent, who went through brutal withdrawals, who destroyed their finances buying Kratom daily. Those stories exist in equal or greater numbers, but they're not featured on company websites. The industry also benefits from regulatory loopholes. Because the FDA classifies Kratom as a supplement, not a drug, companies don't have to prove safety or efficacy before selling it. They don't need clinical trials, they don't need approval, they just need to not get caught making illegal medical claims. It's a system designed for minimal oversight, and Kratom companies have mastered navigating it. And when regulators do step in, the industry fights back. The American Kratom Association, a lobbying group funded by Kratom vendors, has successfully blocked multiple federal and state-level bans by mobilizing users to flood public comment periods, funding sympathetic research, and framing regulation as government overreach. They position themselves as defenders of personal freedom and natural medicine, casting critics as out-of-touch bureaucrats who don't understand the benefits. It's a brilliant strategy, and it works, because at the end of the day, people want to believe Kratom is safe. They want a natural solution to their pain, anxiety, or exhaustion. And the industry gives them exactly what they want to hear, wrapped in green packaging and sold with a smile. The Kratom user base is more diverse than you'd think. It's not just former opioid addicts or chronic pain patients, though they make up a significant portion. You've got college students using it to stay awake for exams, blue-collar workers taking it for energy during long shifts, middle-aged mums buying it for anxiety, veterans using it for PTSD, and yes, recreational users chasing a legal high. Some people start because they're in genuine pain, and doctors won't prescribe opioids anymore. Others start because a friend said, "Try this, it's like coffee but better." The problem is, regardless of why you start, the outcome can be the same: dependence. What begins as "I'll just use it on tough days" turns into "I need it every day to function." And because it's legal and accessible, people don't see the red flags until they're already hooked. There's no stigma, no intervention, no moment where someone says, "Hey, maybe this is a problem." You just keep buying bottles at the gas station until one day you realize you can't stop. Let's look at the different user profiles, because understanding who uses Kratom and why helps explain how this epidemic spread so quietly. First, there are the chronic pain patients. These are people who've been living with pain for years: back injuries, fibromyalgia, arthritis, old accidents that never healed right. They used to have prescriptions for opioids that managed their symptoms and allowed them to function. But during the opioid crackdown, their doctors cut them off, sometimes with little warning and no alternative treatment plan. Suddenly they're suffering again, unable to work or enjoy life, and the medical system has nothing to offer except physical therapy and ibuprofen. Kratom becomes a lifeline, a way to manage pain without a prescription, and it works, at least initially. But tolerance builds, doses increase, and dependence sets in. Then there are the recovering addicts, people who struggled with opioid addiction, heroin, pills, fentanyl, and managed to get clean. But staying clean is hard, especially when you're dealing with cravings, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, and the psychological weight of addiction. Kratom offers a middle ground, something that eases discomfort and reduces cravings without being hard drugs. In harm reduction communities, Kratom is sometimes recommended as a stepping stone, a less dangerous alternative to relapsing on street opioids, and for some it genuinely helps, but for others it just replaces one addiction with another. College students are another major demographic. They use Kratom to stay awake during all-nighters, to focus during exams, or to ease social anxiety at parties. It's legal, it's easy to get, and it's marketed as a natural supplement, so it doesn't carry the stigma of Adderall or cocaine. Students buy it online or from local smoke shops, often with no understanding of what it actually does. They dose casually, inconsistently, sometimes mixing it with alcohol or other substances. The risks don't register, because again, it's just an herbal supplement. Blue-collar workers represent another significant user base. Construction workers, warehouse employees, delivery drivers, people whose jobs are physically demanding and exhausting. Kratom offers energy and pain relief, allowing them to push through long shifts without breaks. It's cheaper than energy drinks and more effective at managing aches and fatigue. But daily use becomes the norm, and before long, they're dependent, dosing every few hours just to maintain energy and avoid withdrawal. Middle-aged adults, particularly women, use Kratom for anxiety, stress, and burnout. They're juggling jobs, kids, aging parents, and constant pressure. Mental health treatment is expensive and time-consuming. Antidepressants come with side effects and stigma. Kratom is easy, immediate, and sold as wellness. A few capsules in the morning, and suddenly the day feels manageable. But the relief is temporary, and the dependence is real. Veterans are another group drawn to Kratom, particularly those dealing with PTSD, chronic pain from injuries, or difficulty transitioning to civilian life. The VA system is often slow and inadequate. Kratom offers relief without the bureaucracy, and veteran-focused online communities frequently discuss it as an alternative to prescription medications. And finally, there are recreational users, people who use Kratom simply because it feels good. They're not managing pain or addiction, they're chasing a buzz. Kratom provides a mild euphoria, especially at higher doses, and because it's legal, it feels safer than traditional drugs. These users might dose occasionally at first, but the line between recreational and habitual use is thin. Across all these groups, there's a common thread. People are searching for relief from something: pain, anxiety, exhaustion, addiction, stress. And Kratom, sitting on a gas station shelf with no barriers and no warnings, promises to deliver. Traditional Kratom use in Southeast Asia involved chewing fresh leaves or brewing them into tea. The effects were mild, the dose was controlled by nature. But in America, we don't do mild. We concentrate, we optimize, we turn everything into the strongest possible version of itself. Enter Kratom extracts. These aren't your grandmother's herbal tea. Companies use industrial extraction methods to concentrate the alkaloids, creating products that are 10, 20, sometimes 50 times stronger than raw leaf powder. A single 2-ounce bottle of liquid Kratom extract can contain as much active alkaloid as 50 grams of powder, enough to hit opioid-level effects in one gulp. And people have no idea. They see a tiny bottle, assume it's weak, and down the whole thing. The result? Extreme sedation, nausea, vomiting, respiratory depression, and in some cases overdose. The CDC has linked Kratom to hundreds of deaths, most involving extracts or combinations with other substances, but these products are still legal, still sold everywhere, and still marketed as safe. Let's talk about how these extracts are made, because the process itself reveals why they're so dangerous. Manufacturers take raw kratom leaves or powder and use solvents, ethanol, water, or other chemicals to extract the alkaloids. The plant matter is soaked, the liquid is collected, and then it's concentrated through evaporation or other methods. What you're left with is a thick, potent resin or liquid that contains far higher levels of mitragyne and 7-hydroxymitragyne than you'd ever find in nature. Some extracts are labelled by their concentration ratio. You might see 10 times extract or 50 times extract, which theoretically means it's 10 or 50 times more concentrated than plain leaf. But here's the problem. There's no standardization. One company's 10 times might be completely different from another's. There's no testing, no verification, no consistency. You're buying based on marketing claims with no way to confirm accuracy. Liquid extracts, often sold in small bottles with names like MIT45, referring to the alkaloid Mitragyna, or OPMS Gold, are particularly dangerous. They're designed for convenience, just twist off the cap and drink. The packaging makes them look like 5-hour energy or a vitamin shot. But the alkaloid content in these tiny bottles can be staggering. A single bottle can contain the equivalent of 20 to 50 grams of plain kratom powder, which would be an extremely high dose even for experienced users. For someone with no tolerance, drinking an entire extract bottle can cause immediate and severe effects: intense nausea, vomiting, dizziness, extreme sedation, and respiratory depression. Your body isn't ready for that level of opioid receptor activation. Your brain gets overwhelmed. Some people pass out. Others end up in the emergency room, confused and terrified, with medical staff who often have no idea what kratom is or how to treat it. The other issue with extracts is dosing unpredictability. Because kratom isn't regulated, the alkaloid content can vary wildly between batches and brands. You might buy the same product twice and get completely different potencies. This makes it nearly impossible to dose safely. Users are essentially guessing, and the consequences of guessing wrong can be severe. Extracts also accelerate tolerance and dependence. Because you're taking such high doses of concentrated alkaloids, your brain adapts much faster. Tolerance builds rapidly, and users find themselves needing more and more to achieve the same effects. What started as 1 bottle a day becomes 2, then 3. The financial cost adds up fast, but more importantly, the physical dependence deepens. Withdrawal from extract use is reportedly worse than withdrawal from plain leaf powder, likely because the higher doses lead to more significant changes in brain chemistry. Users describe it as brutal, with intense cravings, severe anxiety, insomnia, and physical pain that lasts for weeks. And yet, despite all of this, extracts remain legal and widely available. They're sold at gas stations, smoke shops, and online with no restrictions. There's no age verification in most places. A teenager can buy a kratom extract as easily as they can buy a candy bar. The packaging doesn't warn about potency, dependence, or overdose risk. It just says natural botanical extract and leaves the rest to chance. The normalization of these products is stunning. They're displayed alongside energy drinks and supplements, marketed as wellness products, and purchased by people who have no idea they're consuming concentrated opioid agonists. It's a public health disaster hiding in plain sight, and it's only getting worse as more companies enter the market, and competition drives them to create ever stronger products to stand out. Here's what the kratom companies don't put on the label. If you use it daily for more than a few weeks, your body will become dependent. And when you try to stop, you'll go through withdrawal. It's not as severe as heroin withdrawal, but it's real and it's brutal. Sweating, chills, muscle aches, nausea, diarrhea, insomnia, anxiety, depression, restless legs, irritability, the full opioid withdrawal playbook. Some people describe it as worse than quitting coffee. Others say it feels like the flu combined with a panic attack that lasts for weeks. The acute phase usually lasts 5 to 7 days, but the psychological symptoms, cravings, depression, fatigue can linger for months. And because Kratom is legal and sold as a supplement, people don't see it coming. They think, it's just a plant. I can stop whenever I want. Then they try to stop and realize they can't. They're physically dependent on a substance they bought at a gas station. Kratom withdrawal typically follows a predictable timeline, though the severity varies based on dose, duration of use, and individual physiology. For someone who's been using moderate to high doses daily for several months, here's what to expect. The first symptoms usually appear within 6 to 12 hours of the last dose. You start feeling anxious and restless. Your muscles begin to ache, not unbearably at first, but enough to notice. You feel tired but can't relax. This is your brain realizing it's not getting the substance it's come to depend on. By 24 hours, things intensify. The muscle aches worsen, concentrating in your legs, back and shoulders. You start sweating even though you feel cold. Chills come in waves. Your nose runs. Your eyes water. You feel nauseous but can't vomit, or you vomit repeatedly with nothing in your stomach. Sleep becomes impossible. You're exhausted, but every time you close your eyes, your legs twitch and jerk involuntarily. Restless leg syndrome, one of the most maddening symptoms of opioid withdrawal. Days 2 through 5 are typically the worst. The physical symptoms peak. You're sweating through your clothes. Your stomach is a disaster, diarrhea, cramping, nausea. Every muscle in your body aches like you've been beaten with a bat. But the psychological symptoms are worse. Intense anxiety grips you, not about anything specific, just an overwhelming sense of dread and panic. Depression settles in, heavy and suffocating. Nothing brings you joy. You can't imagine ever feeling normal again. And the cravings hit hard, your brain screaming that just one dose would make it all stop, which is true, but also the trap. Some users describe a phenomenon called anhedonia, the complete inability to feel pleasure. Food tastes like cardboard. Music is just noise. Activities you used to enjoy feel pointless. This happens because Kratom has hijacked your brain's reward system, and now that it's gone, your natural dopamine production is suppressed. It can take weeks or months for this to normalize. Sleep disturbance is another nightmare. Even when you're utterly exhausted, you can't sleep for more than an hour or two at a time. When you do sleep, you have vivid, disturbing dreams. You wake up sweating, disoriented, feeling like you haven't rested at all. This can persist for weeks. By day 7, the acute physical symptoms usually start to ease. The sweating decreases. The muscle aches become more manageable. The stomach issues calm down. But you're not out of the woods. What follows is post-acute withdrawal syndrome, or PAWS, a prolonged period of psychological symptoms that can last months. PAWS includes lingering depression, anxiety, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, and persistent cravings. You might feel okay for a few days, then suddenly be hit with a wave of symptoms that feels like you're back in acute withdrawal. These waves can be triggered by stress, lack of sleep, or nothing at all. They're unpredictable and demoralizing. The psychological grip of Kratom withdrawal is often what drives people back to using. The physical symptoms are terrible, but they're time-limited. The mental symptoms, the depression, the anhedonia, the sense that life will never feel good again, those are what break people. And because there's no medical support, no medication-assisted treatment, no widely available resources for Kratom withdrawal, people suffer through it alone. Many try to quit multiple times before succeeding. Each failed attempt deepens the shame and hopelessness. And because Kratom is legal and available everywhere, relapse is always just a gas station visit away. There's no barrier, no time to reconsider. You can be 3 days into withdrawal, suffering, and buy a bottle within minutes. The cruelty of Kratom withdrawal is that it's entirely preventable and entirely ignored. People are becoming dependent on a substance that's marketed as safe, sold without warnings, and treated as harmless. Then when they try to quit, they're blindsided by withdrawal symptoms they never saw coming. With no support system and no medical guidance, they're left to suffer alone, wondering how a natural supplement could possibly cause this much pain. If you want to see the Kratom epidemic in real time, go to Reddit. Subreddits like r/Kratom and r/Quitting Kratom are filled with thousands of users sharing stories, tips, and warnings. On one side, you have people praising Kratom as a miracle plant that saved them from opioid addiction. On the other, you have people begging for help because they're now addicted to Kratom instead. The misinformation is staggering. People claim Kratom isn't addictive, that withdrawal is just psychological, that you can use it daily without consequences. Meanwhile, others are posting about taking 30 grams a day, spending hundreds of dollars a week, and destroying their lives trying to quit. The online Kratom community has become an echo chamber, where harm reduction advice mixes with denial, and newcomers are fed a sanitized version of the truth. Start low, dose responsibly, cycle your use, good advice in theory, but in practice, most people don't follow it. They chase the feeling, increase the dose, and end up dependent. Reddit has become the de facto community hub for Kratom users because mainstream medical resources largely ignore it, and official information is sparse or dismissive. So people turn to each other, sharing experiences, vendor recommendations, and dosing strategies. And while there's genuine support and harm reduction happening, there's also a lot of dangerous misinformation. One of the most common myths perpetuated in Kratom communities is that Kratom isn't addictive. Users will argue that it's habit-forming but not truly addictive, splitting hairs over terminology while missing the point entirely. They'll say things like, "It's no worse than coffee or I can quit anytime, I just don't want to." But scroll through r/Quitting Kratom and you'll see the reality. People in their second week of withdrawal, unable to sleep, racked with anxiety, desperately trying to taper down from 50 grams a day. The community also engages in a lot of us versus them thinking. Critics of Kratom, doctors, regulators, journalists are dismissed as ignorant or bought off by Big Pharma. Any suggestion that Kratom might be dangerous is met with defensive testimonials and accusations of spreading misinformation. There's an almost cult-like devotion among some users, a refusal to acknowledge that Kratom can cause harm even as they themselves struggle with dependence. Vendor recommendations are another issue. Users openly share which brands and suppliers they prefer, which products are strongest, and where to get the best deals. This information is helpful for people already using Kratom, but it also serves as a shopping guide for newcomers who have no idea what they're getting into. Someone posts, "I'm interested in trying Kratom for anxiety," and within hours they've got a dozen replies pointing them towards specific vendors and products, often the high-potency extracts. There's also a widespread belief that Kratom is safe as long as you follow certain rules. Rotate strains, take tolerance breaks, stay hydrated, and don't mix with other substances. This advice isn't entirely wrong, but it creates a false sense of security. It implies that as long as you're careful, you can use Kratom without consequences. But tolerance builds even with rotation. Dependence develops even with breaks. The rules are more like superstitions than actual safeguards. The Kratom saved my life narrative dominates many discussions, and while it's true for some people, it's become a shield against criticism. Any time someone raises concerns about Kratom's risks, They're met with a flood of testimonials about how Kratom helped people quit harder drugs or manage chronic pain. These stories are real and valid, but they drown out equally valid stories of people who became addicted to Kratom, lost jobs, destroyed relationships, and suffered through brutal withdrawals. There's also a generational divide in how Kratom is discussed online. Older users, particularly those who came to Kratom as a harm reduction tool during the opioid crisis, tend to be more cautious and aware of the risks. Younger users, who discovered Kratom through wellness marketing or peer recommendations, often treat it more casually, like a supplement or nootropic. They dose inconsistently, mix it with other substances, and don't take dependence seriously until it's too late. The quitting communities, like r/quitting Kratom, tell a different story. These forums are filled with people in various stages of withdrawal, sharing timelines, symptoms, and coping strategies. The tone is much more somber. Users describe the hell of acute withdrawal, the months-long struggle with POWs, the financial damage from years of daily use, and the shame of being addicted to something sold at gas stations. Many describe feeling stupid or weak for becoming dependent on Kratom. They believe the marketing, the testimonials, the promises that it was safe. They thought they were being responsible by choosing a natural alternative to pharmaceuticals, and now they're trapped, dosing multiple times a day just to avoid withdrawal, spending money they don't have, and hiding their use from friends and family. The Reddit Kratom ecosystem's a microcosm of the larger epidemic, a mix of genuine support, dangerous misinformation, denial, and suffering, all happening in public view while the rest of the world largely ignores it. Here's the nightmare scenario. Kratom is legal, sold in gas stations, and there's no age restriction in most states. A teenager can walk in, buy a Kratom shot, and walk out, no questions asked. They see it next to energy drinks, assume it's similar, and down it. But Kratom isn't Red Bull. At high doses, especially in extract form, it can cause sedation, nausea, and respiratory depression. For a young person with no tolerance, it can be overwhelming and dangerous. There are reports of high school students using Kratom to get high, to cope with anxiety, or because they heard it's legal and safe. Some are using it to self-medicate undiagnosed mental health issues. Others are using it recreationally at parties, and parents have no idea because it's not on their radar. It's not weed, it's not vaping, it's not pills, it's a supplement from the gas station. How do you even start that conversation? Teenagers are particularly vulnerable to Kratom for several reasons. First, their brains are still developing, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making and impulse control. They're more likely to experiment, less likely to consider long-term consequences, and more susceptible to peer influence. Second, teenagers are facing unprecedented levels of anxiety, depression, and stress. Academic pressure, social media, economic uncertainty, and a general sense of hopelessness have created a mental health crisis among young people. Many are desperately looking for relief, and Kratom, marketed as a natural mood enhancer, seems like a safe option. Third, Kratom is invisible to adults. Parents know to look for beer cans, smell for weed, and check for pill bottles. But a Kratom shot looks like an energy drink. Kratom powder looks like protein powder. There's no distinct smell, no paraphernalia, no obvious signs. A teenager can use Kratom daily, and their parents would have no idea. High school and college students are discovering Kratom through social media, friends, and online forums. TikTok and Instagram posts promote it as a study aid, a party enhancer, or an anxiety remedy. Influencers, often unintentionally, normalize its use by casually mentioning it in videos. And because it's legal, there's no sense of danger or taboo. Some students use Kratom to stay awake during exam periods, cramming for tests and writing papers. Others use it to cope with social anxiety, taking a dose before parties or presentations. Some use it recreationally, seeking the mild euphoria that comes with higher doses, and some use it to self-medicate deeper issues, depression, trauma, undiagnosed ADHD, because mental health treatment is inaccessible or stigmatized. The problem is that teenage brains are especially susceptible to developing dependence. Their reward systems are more reactive, and their ability to regulate substance use is weaker. What starts as occasional use can quickly become daily use, and dependence can develop faster than in adults. There are reports from school counselors, teachers, and parents about students showing signs of Kratom use and withdrawal, unexplained absences, mood swings, declining grades, and physical symptoms like nausea and fatigue. But because Kratom isn't widely known, these signs are often misattributed to other causes: illness, stress, or typical teenage behavior. Some teenagers are even buying Kratom online in bulk, drawn by lower prices and convenience. They dose casually, sharing it with friends, treating it like a harmless supplement. There's no education, no warnings, no understanding of what they're actually consuming, and when dependence sets in, teenagers are even less equipped to handle it than adults. They don't have the resources to seek help, the maturity to recognize the problem, or the support systems to quit. They suffer through withdrawal alone, often relapsing because the discomfort is unbearable, and Kratom is always just a click or a store visit away. The tragedy is that this is entirely preventable. Age restrictions, proper labeling, education campaigns, basic regulatory measures could significantly reduce teenage Kratom use. But in most places, those measures don't exist. Kratom sits on shelves next to energy drinks marketed as wellness, and teenagers buy it thinking it's safe. Parents, teachers, and medical professionals are largely unaware. Kratom doesn't come up in drug education programs. It's not included in standard drug tests. It exists in a blind spot, and teenagers are falling into it in growing numbers. The epidemic is silent, hidden behind legal status and marketing, and by the time anyone notices, the damage is already done. Because Kratom is unregulated, there's no quality control. The FDA doesn't test it. Companies don't have to prove purity. And the results are terrifying. Tests have found Kratom products contaminated with heavy metals like lead and nickel, bacteria including salmonella, and even other drugs. Some Kratom products have been spiked with synthetic opioids to make them more potent. Others contain dangerously high levels of the alkaloid 7-hydroxymitragyne, which is significantly more potent and risky than mitragyne. You have no idea what you're actually ingesting. That bottle could contain exactly what the label says, or it could contain something that will put you in the hospital. And because there's no regulation, there's no accountability. Companies can, and do, lie about alkaloid content, sourcing, and purity. Let's start with heavy metals. Kratom trees absorb minerals from the soil they grow in, and if that soil is contaminated with industrial pollutants, those toxins end up in the leaves. Lead, arsenic, cadmium, and nickel have all been detected in Kratom products sold in the United States. These metals accumulate in your body over time, especially if you're using Kratom daily. Lead exposure can cause cognitive impairment, kidney damage, and neurological problems. Arsenic is a carcinogen. Cadmium damages your kidneys and bones, and you're getting trace amounts of all of this with every dose, completely unaware. Then there's bacterial contamination. In 2018, the CDC linked a multi-state outbreak of salmonella to Kratom products. Over 100 people got sick. The contamination likely occurred during harvesting, processing, or packaging in Southeast Asia, where sanitation standards are inconsistent at best. Kratom leaves are often dried on tarps in the open air, exposed to dirt, insects, and animal waste. They're processed in facilities with no health inspections. Then they're shipped to the US, packaged into capsules or powder, and sold with no testing for pathogens. Some Kratom has tested positive for E. coli, mold, and other bacteria. If you're taking Kratom capsules every day, you're potentially exposing yourself to these contaminants repeatedly. For most people, the immune system can handle small amounts, but for someone with a weakened immune system, it can lead to serious illness. The most disturbing contamination issue involves adulteration. Kratom products intentionally spiked with other substances to enhance effects or cut costs. There have been cases of kratom laced with synthetic opioids like odesmethyl tramadol, a potent opioid analogue that's not approved for human use. Users had no idea they were taking a synthetic drug. They thought they were using a natural plant. Some ended up overdosing. Other products have been found to contain phenibut, a powerful GABAergic substance that causes severe dependence and dangerous withdrawal. It's often added to kratom to enhance sedative effects, but it's not listed on the label. People take what they think is pure kratom and end up addicted to multiple substances without knowing it. There's also the issue of inconsistent alkaloid levels. Because kratom isn't standardized, the amount of mitragyna and 7-hydroxymitragyna can vary wildly between batches. One capsule might have 2 milligrams of active alkaloids. Another from the same bottle might have 20. You're essentially playing pharmacological roulette every time you dose. Some companies engage in outright fraud, claiming their products are lab-tested and showing certificates of analysis that are either fabricated or based on a single batch that doesn't represent what's actually being sold. There's no oversight, no verification, no consequences for lying. Independent lab testing has revealed shocking discrepancies. Products labelled as containing 5% mitragyna actually contain 2% or 12%. Extract products claiming to be 10 times concentration are sometimes weaker than plain powder. The labels mean nothing because no one is checking. And then there's the sourcing problem. Most kratom sold in the US is imported from Indonesia, where it's grown, harvested and processed under completely unregulated conditions. There's no chain of custody, no quality assurance, no way to verify that what you're buying is actually what the vendor claims. Some vendors mix old, degraded kratom with fresh product to stretch inventory. Others cut their kratom with cheaper plant matter to increase profits. You have no idea what you're putting in your body. That green powder could be pure kratom, or it could be contaminated with bacteria, spiked with synthetic drugs, diluted with filler, and loaded with heavy metals. And because it's sold as a supplement, there's no requirement for companies to ensure safety or purity. You're trusting the honour system of an industry that has repeatedly proven it has no honour. Kratom is rarely used in isolation. Many people combine it with other substances, alcohol, benzodiazepines, cannabis, prescription medications, and that's where things get deadly. Kratom already affects your respiratory system and central nervous system. Add in another depressant like alcohol or Xanax, and you're stacking risks. The CDC has documented numerous deaths involving kratom combined with other substances. The problem is compounded by the fact that users often don't view kratom as a real drug. They think mixing it with a beer is harmless because, hey, it's just a plant. But your body doesn't care about semantics. It just knows its respiratory system is shutting down. Let's talk about what happens when you combine kratom with other central nervous system depressants. Kratom, especially at higher doses, slows your breathing, lowers your heart rate, and sedates you. So does alcohol, so do benzodiazepines like Xanax, Valium and Klonopin, so do prescription opioids. When you stack these effects, you're not just doubling the risk, you're multiplying it. Your respiratory system has a certain threshold. Below a certain rate of breathing, your body can't get enough oxygen. Your brain starts to shut down. Your organs begin to fail. This is how overdose deaths happen. Respiratory depression so severe that you stop breathing entirely. And when you combine substances that all suppress respiration, you can cross that threshold without realizing how close you are. People mix kratom with alcohol all the time. They'll dose kratom in the afternoon, then go out drinking in the evening, or they'll take kratom at a party and have a few beers. It seems harmless because both substances individually feel manageable. But together, the sedative effects amplify. You get drunker faster, you feel more sedated, and your breathing slows to dangerous levels. There have been documented deaths involving kratom and alcohol, usually with other contributing factors, but the combination is what pushed the person over the edge. And because kratom doesn't show up on standard toxicology screens, many of these deaths are initially attributed solely to alcohol or other drugs, until deeper investigation reveals kratom was involved. Benzodiazepines are even more dangerous when combined with kratom. Benzos are prescribed for anxiety and insomnia, and millions of Americans take them daily. If someone is using kratom for pain or anxiety, and also taking prescribed Xanax or Ativan, they're combining two powerful CNS depressants. The risk of respiratory failure skyrockets. Some users intentionally combine kratom with benzos to enhance the sedative effects, seeking a deeper euphoria or stronger relaxation. This is playing with fire. The line between high and overdose becomes razor thin, and you can cross it without warning. Kratom is also frequently combined with cannabis. This combination is extremely popular because both substances are legal in many states and perceived as natural and safe. Cannabis potentiates kratom's effects, making them stronger and longer lasting. For some users, this is desirable, but it also increases side effects, nausea, dizziness, sedation, and can lead to uncomfortable or even dangerous experiences, especially for people with low tolerance. Then there's the issue of prescription medications. People taking antidepressants, blood pressure medications, or pain relievers often don't realize that kratom can interact with these drugs. Kratom is metabolized by the same liver enzymes that process many common medications. Taking kratom can interfere with how your body processes other drugs, leading to dangerous accumulations or reduced effectiveness of necessary medications. For example, kratom can interact with SSRIs, antidepressants like Prozac or Zoloft, potentially causing serotonin syndrome, a life-threatening condition characterized by confusion, rapid heart rate, high blood pressure, and seizures. It can interact with blood thinners, increasing bleeding risk. It can interact with medications for diabetes, causing dangerous blood sugar fluctuations. Most people using kratom have no idea these interactions exist. They don't tell their doctors they're using kratom because they don't think of it as a drug, it's a supplement. And doctors often don't ask because kratom isn't on their radar. So dangerous interactions go undetected until someone ends up in the ER with mysterious symptoms. There's also a subset of users who combine kratom with stimulants, caffeine, energy drinks, Adderall, or even cocaine. The logic is that kratom provides pain relief or euphoria, while the stimulant provides energy and focus. But this combination puts enormous stress on your cardiovascular system. Your heart is being told to speed up and slow down simultaneously. Blood pressure spikes. Heart rate becomes erratic. The risk of cardiac events increases. The polydrug problem with kratom is a ticking time bomb, because most users don't understand pharmacology. They think that because each substance feels safe individually, combining them is fine. But your body is a chemistry lab, and when you start mixing compounds, you create unpredictable reactions. Kratom isn't just a harmless plant when it's interacting with alcohol, benzos, cannabis, prescriptions, or stimulants. It's a variable in an equation that can equal hospitalization or death. For people living with chronic pain, kratom can seem like a godsend, especially in a medical system that's become terrified of prescribing opioids. Doctors are cutting off pain patients, leaving them desperate and suffering. Kratom offers relief without a prescription, without judgment, without jumping through hoops. But relief comes with a price. What starts as pain management turns into dependence. The dose creeps up. The effects wear off faster. Soon you're not taking kratom for pain. You're taking it to avoid withdrawal. And your pain? It's worse than ever because kratom, like all opioids, can cause hyperalgesia, a condition where your nervous system becomes more sensitive to pain. You're trapped. You need kratom to function, but it's making your original problem worse. Let's talk about how chronic pain patients end up here. You're living with constant pain, maybe from a car accident years ago, maybe from a degenerative condition like arthritis or fibromyalgia, maybe from a workplace injury that never healed properly. For years, you had a prescription for opioids that made life bearable. You could work, sleep, take care of your family. The medication wasn't perfect, but it was something. Then the opioid crisis hit the news. Regulatory agencies cracked down. Doctors became terrified of prescribing opioids, fearing lawsuits, license suspension, or DEA investigations. Prescription monitoring programs flagged patients as high risk. Insurance companies started denying coverage for long-term opioid therapy. And suddenly your doctor calls you in and says, "I can't prescribe this anymore." Some doctors taper patients gradually, but many don't. Some cut patients off abruptly, leaving them not just in pain but also in opioid withdrawal. You're sick, suffering, and abandoned by a medical system that suddenly views you with suspicion instead of compassion. You're told to try physical therapy, meditation, ibuprofen. None of it touches the pain. This is where kratom enters the picture. You hear about it online, in chronic pain forums, in support groups. People say it works, that it's natural, that it's legal. You're desperate enough to try anything. So you order some powder online or buy a bottle at a local smoke shop, and at first it works. The pain eases. Not completely, but enough. You can sleep again. You can get through your day. It feels like a miracle. You're grateful, relieved, hopeful for the first time in months. But here's what you don't realize. You've just replaced one opioid with another. Kratom is acting on the same receptors in your brain that your prescription medications were. You're not solving the problem, you're just using a different delivery system. And because kratom isn't pharmaceutical grade, because the dose isn't standardized, because there's no medical supervision, you're walking into a minefield blindfolded. Tolerance builds quickly. The 5 grams that worked last week doesn't work this week. So you increase to 7 grams, then 10, then 15. Each dose increase provides relief for a while, then stops working. You're chasing effectiveness, constantly adjusting, constantly increasing, never quite getting back to that initial relief. And then comes the insidious part, hyperalgesia. Your nervous system, constantly bombarded with opioid agonists, starts to malfunction. Pain signals become amplified. Your threshold for discomfort drops. Things that never hurt before now hurt. Your original pain intensifies. You're in more pain than you were before you started taking kratom, but now you also can't stop because withdrawal makes everything even worse. You're dosing multiple times a day, not for relief anymore, but just to maintain baseline. If you go more than a few hours without kratom, withdrawal symptoms kick in, anxiety, muscle aches, sweating on top of your chronic pain. You're trapped in a cycle where you need the substance just to avoid feeling worse, but taking it isn't actually helping your pain anymore. The financial burden adds up. You're spending hundreds of dollars a month on kratom, money you don't have, money that should go to rent, food, medical bills. But you can't stop because the thought of withdrawal on top of chronic pain is unbearable. Your relationships suffer. Family members notice you're different, irritable, withdrawn, secretive. You hide your kratom use because you're ashamed. On some level that you're dependent. But you justify it by saying you need it for pain. And that's partially true, but it's also denial. You try to quit. You taper down, following advice from online forums, and for a while it works. You get down to a lower dose, but then you have a bad pain day, a flare-up, and you think, just this once, I'll take a little extra. And that little extra turns into a lot extra. and within days you're back to your previous dose or higher. The medical system offers no help. You can't tell your doctor you're using Kratom because they'll either not know what it is, or they'll dismiss you as drug-seeking. There's no medication-assisted treatment for Kratom dependence. There's no prescription alternative that's easier to manage. You're on your own. And the cruelest irony, Kratom was supposed to be the solution. It was supposed to help when the medical system failed you. But now it's another problem, another source of suffering, another trap. You're a chronic pain patient who turned to a legal supplement for relief and ended up addicted to an unregulated substance that's making your pain worse while destroying your life. The Kratom industry knows it's under threat. The FDA has tried to classify it as a Schedule I substance multiple times. Several states have banned it. International regulators have restricted it. But the industry fights back. Hard. They formed lobbying groups like the American Kratom Association, aka, which funds studies, hires PR firms, and pushes the narrative that Kratom is safe and beneficial. They've successfully blocked federal bans by flooding the DEA with public comments, funding research that supports their claims, and positioning themselves as advocates for personal freedom and alternative medicine. It's the same playbook Big Tobacco used for decades: deny harm, question science, and frame regulation as government overreach. Let's examine how the Kratom industry operates, because it's a masterclass in regulatory capture and corporate manipulation. The American Kratom Association is the industry's primary lobbying arm. They present themselves as a consumer advocacy group, champions of personal freedom and natural medicine. But make no mistake, they're funded by Kratom vendors and manufacturers who have billions of dollars at stake. The AKA's strategy is multi-pronged. First, they mobilize users. When the DEA or FDA proposes regulations, the AKA sends out mass emails and social media posts urging users to submit public comments. They provide templates, talking points, and instructions. The result? Regulatory agencies get flooded with thousands of comments defending Kratom, far outnumbering comments from medical professionals or concerned parties. It creates the appearance of overwhelming public support. Second, they fund research. The AKA commission studies designed to show Kratom's benefits and downplay risks. They partner with sympathetic researchers, often those with financial conflicts of interest, to produce papers that support their narrative. These studies are then cited in lobbying materials, media appearances, and public comments as scientific evidence that Kratom is safe. The quality of this research varies wildly. Some studies are legitimate but limited in scope. Others are methodologically flawed, based on self-reported surveys rather than controlled trials, or designed with outcomes in mind. But to regulators and the public, they look like science, and that's what matters. Third, they attack critics. The AKA aggressively challenges anyone who questions Kratom's safety. They accuse the FDA of corruption and being beholden to pharmaceutical companies. They claim researchers who find harm are biased or incompetent. They frame media coverage of Kratom deaths or dependence as fear-mongering. It's a classic strategy. Discredit the messenger to avoid addressing the message. Fourth, they exploit libertarian and anti-regulation sentiment. The AKA positions itself as fighting against government overreach, defending personal freedom and bodily autonomy. They ally with conservative and libertarian groups who oppose FDA regulation on principle. The narrative becomes the government wants to ban a natural plant that helps people, which resonates with a lot of Americans regardless of political affiliation. The industry also benefits from regulatory loopholes. Because Kratom is classified as a dietary supplement under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, DSHEA, it operates in a legal grey zone. The FDA can take action against specific products or companies making false claims, but banning Kratom entirely requires a lengthy regulatory process that the industry vigorously opposes at every step. DSHEA was passed in 1994, largely due to lobbying by the supplement industry. It created a framework where supplements are assumed safe until proven otherwise, shifting the burden of proof to regulators instead of manufacturers. Companies can sell products without proving efficacy or safety, as long as they don't make explicit medical claims. It's a loophole that the supplement industry has exploited for decades, and Kratom fits right in. The Kratom lobby also works at the state level. When states propose bans, the AKA deploys lobbyists, organises rallies and mobilises users to contact legislators. They've successfully prevented or overturned bans in multiple states by framing the issue as a choice between personal freedom and government control. In some states, they've pushed for the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, a law that regulates Kratom sales, age restrictions, labelling requirements, purity standards, instead of banning it. On the surface, this sounds reasonable, but critics argue it legitimizes Kratom as a safe product and creates a false sense of security while doing little to address the real risks. The industry also uses astroturfing, creating fake grassroots movements that are actually funded by corporations. They organise Kratom rallies and Save Kratom campaigns that look like organic user activism, but are often coordinated and funded by vendors who stand to lose profits from regulation. Media manipulation is another tactic. The AKA provides sympathetic journalists with pre-packaged stories, expert sources, who are often on the industry's payroll, and user testimonials. They pitch stories about miracle recoveries and government overreach, while downplaying stories about deaths, addiction, and contamination. The parallels to big tobacco are striking. For decades, tobacco companies denied that smoking caused cancer, funded biased research, attacked critics, and lobbied against regulation. They positioned themselves as defenders of personal freedom and portrayed public health advocates as prohibitionists. It worked for a long time, and thousands of people died as a result. The Kratom industry is following the exact same playbook. Deny harm, fund sympathetic research, mobilize users, exploit loopholes, and frame regulation as oppression. And it's working. Despite hundreds of deaths, widespread dependence, and clear evidence of harm, Kratom remains legal and largely unregulated in most of the United States. Kratom's legal status is a patchwork mess. It's banned in 6 states: Alabama, Arkansas, Indiana, Rhode Island, Vermont, Wisconsin, and legal in the rest, though some cities and counties have their own bans. Internationally, it's banned in Thailand, ironically its country of origin, Malaysia, Australia, and several European countries. But in the US, you can order it online and have it delivered to your door in 2 days. The inconsistency creates confusion and danger. People assume that because it's legal where they live, it must be safe. They don't realise they're one state line away from possessing an illegal substance. Let's start with the federal level. Kratom is legal under federal law but exists in regulatory limbo. The FDA has not approved it for any medical use. The DEA has considered classifying it as a Schedule I controlled substance, the same category as heroin and LSD, but has backed down twice due to public pressure and industry lobbying. In 2016, the DEA announced its intention to schedule Kratom, citing public health concerns. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The American Kratom Association mobilized tens of thousands of users to submit comments opposing the ban. Members of Congress received calls and letters. Media coverage painted the DEA as heavy-handed bureaucrats attacking a natural plant that helps people. The DEA received over 23,000 comments, most opposing the ban. They withdrew the proposal. The FDA, meanwhile, has taken a more aggressive stance. They've issued public warnings about Kratom's risks, linked it to dozens of deaths, and seized shipments of contaminated products. but they lack the authority to ban it outright without a lengthy rule-making process, and the industry fights every step. This federal stalemate has pushed the issue to states, and the state-level situation is chaotic. 6 states have banned Kratom entirely, making possession and sale illegal. These bans are often motivated by local overdose deaths, law enforcement concerns, or pressure from medical communities. But enforcement is inconsistent. People still buy Kratom online from out-of-state vendors and have it shipped to their homes, skirting local bans. In states where Kratom is legal, some cities and counties have implemented their own restrictions. For example, San Diego banned Kratom in 2016, making it illegal within city limits, even though it's legal in the rest of California. Sarasota County in Florida has a similar ban. These local ordinances create a confusing landscape where legality changes based on your zip code. Age restrictions vary wildly. Some states require buyers to be 18 or 21. Others have no age restrictions at all, meaning a child could theoretically purchase Kratom. Some retailers voluntarily check ID, others don't. There's no federal standard, no consistency. Then there's the international picture. Thailand, where Kratom has been used traditionally for centuries, banned it in 1943. The ban was partly motivated by economic concerns. The government was losing opium tax revenue to Kratom use, but also by recognition of its addictive potential. The ban remained in place until 2021, when Thailand decriminalized Kratom for cultural and economic reasons, hoping to capitalize on the plant's renewed global popularity. Malaysia, another Southeast Asian country with traditional Kratom use, banned it in 2003. Possession can result in fines and imprisonment. Australia classifies Kratom as a Schedule 9 substance, the highest level of restriction, reserved for drugs with high abuse potential and no accepted medical use. Most European countries restrict or ban Kratom through various mechanisms: controlled substance laws, medicine regulations, or public health orders. But in the United States, the majority of states allow Kratom to be sold openly with minimal or no regulation. The inconsistency sends a confusing message. If Kratom is dangerous enough to ban in 6 states and most developed countries, why is it sold at gas stations in 44 others? The legal chaos also creates practical problems. People who use Kratom legally in one state can become criminals by crossing a state line. Someone travelling from Georgia to Indiana with Kratom in their car is now in possession of a banned substance. If they're stopped by police, they could face criminal charges. There's also the issue of interstate commerce. Online vendors operate nationally, selling Kratom to customers in all 50 states. They often ignore local bans, shipping to addresses in restricted areas. Some vendors include disclaimers stating they won't ship to banned states, but enforcement is non-existent. If you order Kratom online in Alabama, there's a good chance it'll be delivered despite the state ban. The lack of federal clarity also hampers research. Scientists interested in studying Kratom face regulatory hurdles because of its ambiguous legal status. Funding agencies are reluctant to support research on a substance that might be banned. Universities worry about liability. The result is a lack of quality research, which perpetuates the cycle of ignorance and debate. This legal patchwork benefits the Kratom industry. As long as there's no federal ban, they can continue operating in most of the country while fighting state-level restrictions one at a time. They exploit the confusion, the regulatory gaps, and the political difficulty of implementing national drug policy. Meanwhile, users are caught in the middle, unsure if Kratom is safe, unsure if it's legal, and unable to get clear answers from anyone in authority. One of the most dangerous myths about Kratom is that you can't overdose on it. This is false. While Kratom alone is less likely to cause a fatal overdose compared to fentanyl or heroin, it absolutely can, especially in extract form or when combined with other substances. The CDC has linked kratom to over 100 deaths. Symptoms of kratom overdose include extreme sedation, confusion, nausea, vomiting, seizures, respiratory depression, and cardiac arrest. People think because it's legal and natural it's benign, but emergency rooms are seeing more kratom-related visits every year. Let's be clear about what an overdose is. It's when you take enough of a substance to cause severe, life-threatening symptoms or death. The threshold varies by substance, dose, tolerance, and individual physiology. For kratom, the lethal dose isn't precisely known because it hasn't been studied in controlled settings, and frankly, no one's volunteering for that experiment. But we have case reports, autopsy findings, and emergency room data that paint a clear picture. Kratom can kill you. In many documented deaths, kratom was found in the deceased system along with other substances, alcohol, benzodiazepines, fentanyl. Critics argue this means kratom wasn't the sole cause, and they're technically correct. But kratom was a contributing factor. It added respiratory depression, sedation, or cardiovascular stress that pushed the person over the edge. However, there are also cases where kratom appears to be the primary or only substance involved. These are rarer but significant. Autopsy reports show high levels of kratom alkaloids and symptoms consistent with opioid toxicity, respiratory failure, pulmonary edema, cardiac arrest. Concentrated extracts dramatically increase overdose risk. Remember those gas station shots with 50 times the alkaloid concentration of regular powder? Someone with no tolerance who drinks one could experience severe toxicity. Their respiratory rate plummets. They become confused and disoriented. They vomit repeatedly. Their heart rhythm becomes irregular. Without medical intervention, they can die. Seizures are another documented risk. Multiple case reports describe people experiencing tonic-clonic seizures after taking large doses of kratom or kratom extracts. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but it's likely related to kratom's complex pharmacology and its effects on multiple neurotransmitter systems. Emergency departments are seeing more kratom cases every year, and doctors often struggle to manage them because kratom toxicity isn't well studied. There's no specific antidote. Naloxone, Narcan, which reverses opioid overdoses, sometimes helps but isn't consistently effective because kratom's alkaloids don't bind to opioid receptors the same way traditional opioids do. Treatment is largely supportive: IV fluids, oxygen, monitoring vital signs, and hoping the patient stabilizes as the drug metabolizes. In severe cases, patients may need ventilator support if their breathing becomes too depressed. The myth that you can't overdose on kratom is perpetuated by the industry and by users who want to believe kratom is safe. They'll point to the fact that kratom has been used for centuries without mass deaths, which is true but ignores context. Traditional use involved chewing fresh leaves in moderate amounts. Modern use involves concentrated extracts taken in massive doses, often in combination with other substances. It's not the same thing. Online forums contribute to the myth by sharing anecdotal reports like "I took 50 grams and was fine," or "I've never heard of anyone dying from kratom alone." These statements ignore survivorship bias. The people who had severe reactions or died aren't around to post warnings. The CDC has documented kratom-involved deaths in multiple states. While the exact number is debated, partly because kratom doesn't always show up in standard toxicology screens, over 100 deaths have been linked to kratom between 2016 and 2021. That's not a huge number compared to fentanyl, which kills tens of thousands annually, but it's not zero either. And it's likely an undercount because many medical examiners don't test for kratom unless there's a reason to suspect it. Symptoms of kratom overdose are similar to opioid overdose but with some unique features. Extreme sedation and confusion are common, nausea and vomiting sometimes severe, seizures in some cases, respiratory depression, slow, shallow breathing that can progress to respiratory arrest, cardiac issues including irregular heartbeat, and, in rare cases, cardiac arrest. The danger is compounded by the fact that users often don't recognize they're overdosing until it's too late. They think they're just too high or having a bad reaction. They don't call for help because they don't want to get in trouble or because they don't realize how serious it is. And by the time someone finds them, critical time has been lost. The overdose myth is dangerous because it creates a false sense of security. People take excessive doses thinking there's no risk. They mix Kratom with other substances carelessly. They encourage friends to try it without warnings. And when something goes wrong, they're unprepared and uninformed about how to respond. Here's the ultimate irony. Thailand, where Kratom originates and has been used traditionally for centuries, banned it in 1943. Why? Because it was cutting into the government's opium tax revenue. Yes, really. But also because authorities recognised its addictive potential. It remained illegal until 2021, when Thailand decriminalised it, not because it's safe, but for economic and cultural reasons. Meanwhile, in America, we're treating it like a harmless supplement. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. Let's unpack this. In the early 20th century, Thailand's government made significant revenue from taxing opium. Opium was legal, regulated, and profitable. But Kratom, which grew wild and was freely available, offered similar effects without the tax revenue. Workers were using Kratom instead of opium, which meant less money flowing into government coffers. So in 1943, Thailand banned Kratom under the Kratom Act. The official justification included concerns about addiction and abuse, but historians agree that economics played a major role. The government wanted to protect its opium monopoly. Ironically, by the time Kratom was banned, international pressure was already building to ban opium, which Thailand eventually did. But the Kratom ban remained. For decades, Kratom was illegal in Thailand. Possession could result in fines or imprisonment. The tree itself was ordered to be destroyed, though enforcement was inconsistent, especially in rural areas where Kratom grew naturally and had cultural significance. But Kratom use never disappeared. It went underground. Labourers, particularly in southern Thailand, continued using it despite the ban. It was part of their culture, their work routine, their coping mechanism. The ban just made it illegal without actually stopping use. Fast forward to 2021. Thailand, seeing the global Kratom market boom and recognising an opportunity, decriminalised Kratom. The government now allows cultivation, sale and use under regulated conditions. They're positioning Thailand as a legitimate source for international Kratom trade, hoping to capitalise on the plant's commercial value. But decriminalisation doesn't mean endorsement. Thai health authorities still warn about Kratom's risks, particularly high-dose use and dependence. The government regulates it as a controlled herbal product, requiring licensing for producers and sellers. It's not a free-for-all. Meanwhile, in America, Kratom is sold with fewer restrictions than in its country of origin. You can buy concentrated extracts at gas stations with no license, no oversight, no quality control. The substance that Thailand felt was dangerous enough to ban for 78 years is marketed in the US as a wellness supplement. The irony extends beyond Thailand. Malaysia, another Southeast Asian country with traditional Kratom use, banned it in 2003 and maintains strict enforcement. Possession can result in significant fines and imprisonment. Malaysian authorities cite addiction, abuse, and public health concerns as justifications for the ban. Indonesia, currently the world's largest exporter of Kratom, most of it destined for American consumers, has a complicated relationship with the plant. It's legal to grow and export, but domestic use is restricted in many regions. The Indonesian government has considered a nationwide ban multiple times, citing abuse and dependence issues, but economic interests have prevailed. Kratom export is lucrative, and banning it would hurt farmers and exporters. So we have a situation where the countries with the most historical and cultural experience with Kratom, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, either ban it, heavily restrict it, or express significant concerns about its risks. But in America, where Kratom has no cultural history and appeared only recently as a commercial product, it's sold freely. This should be a red flag. The countries that know Kratom best are the most cautious about it. They've seen the consequences of widespread use, addiction, public health problems, social disruption. They've decided, through different paths, that Kratom needs to be controlled or prohibited. America, in contrast, treats Kratom like a novelty, a harmless botanical curiosity. We import it by the ton, package it in bright bottles, sell it at convenience stores, and market it as natural wellness. We ignore the warnings from the countries where Kratom comes from. It's similar to the cat situation. Cat, a plant used traditionally in East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, is illegal in the United States and most Western countries because of concerns about abuse and addiction. But in its countries of origin, it's legal and culturally accepted. With Kratom, the situation is reversed. The origin countries restrict it, and America embraces it. The cognitive dissonance is stunning. We're taking a plant that its home countries decided was dangerous, importing it en masse, concentrating it into forms far more potent than traditional use, and selling it to a population with no cultural framework for responsible use. And when people get addicted, overdose, or die, we act surprised. Thailand's decision to decriminalise Kratom in 2021 doesn't validate its safety. It was an economic decision, a pragmatic recognition that the global market exists, and Thailand might as well profit from it under regulated conditions. But even with decriminalisation, Thai authorities are far more cautious about Kratom than American retailers. The irony is that America, which positions itself as having advanced drug policy and public health infrastructure, is less cautious about Kratom than developing countries with far fewer resources. We've learned nothing from the opioid crisis, from the history of unregulated substances, or from the experiences of the countries where Kratom originates. We're repeating the same mistakes, just with a different plant. Spend 5 minutes in online Kratom communities and you'll see the phrase "Kratom saved my life" repeated endlessly. And for some people, there's truth to it. Kratom has helped people get off heroin, manage chronic pain, and avoid relapse. But the narrative has also become a shield against criticism. Any suggestion that Kratom might be harmful is met with defensive testimonials and accusations of fear-mongering. The problem is, harm reduction and harm denial are not the same thing. Yes, Kratom might be less dangerous than fentanyl, but that doesn't make it safe. Let's acknowledge the valid core of this narrative. There are people who are addicted to heroin or prescription opioids, who face death or devastation, and who use Kratom as a bridge to stability. For them, Kratom genuinely was life-saving. It eased withdrawal symptoms enough to avoid relapsing on more dangerous substances. It provided a legal alternative that allowed them to function, hold a job, and rebuild their lives. In harm reduction terms, this is significant. If the choice is between using fentanyl-laced street heroin and using Kratom, Kratom is objectively safer. Fewer immediate overdose deaths, lower potency, and legal availability make it a better option in that specific context. The problem is when this narrative is extrapolated into Kratom is safe for everyone, or Kratom has no risks. That's where truth becomes denial. Just because Kratom helped some people get off harder drugs doesn't mean it's harmless. Many of those same people will admit, if pressed, that they're now dependent on Kratom, taking large doses daily, and struggling with the consequences. Online communities amplify the saved my life narrative because it's emotionally powerful. and because people want to believe Kratom is a miracle plant. Testimonials are shared constantly, often with evangelical fervour. New users are welcomed with reassurances that Kratom is safe, natural and non-addictive. Anyone who suggests otherwise is attacked as ignorant, biased or paid off by pharmaceutical companies. This creates an echo chamber where dissenting voices are drowned out. If you post about struggling with Kratom dependence or having severe side effects, you're told you're doing it wrong, wrong strain, wrong dose, wrong vendor. The problem is never Kratom, it's always user error. This is classic addict thinking: deflect responsibility, protect the substance, blame external factors. The narrative also ignores the people for whom Kratom didn't save their life, it ruined it. People who started using Kratom for mild anxiety or pain and ended up severely dependent. People who lost jobs because they were dosing every few hours and going through withdrawal at work. People who destroyed their finances buying Kratom extract daily. People who ended up in emergency rooms with seizures, liver damage, or cardiac issues. These stories exist in equal or greater numbers than the Save My Life testimonials, but they're marginalised. They're dismissed as outliers, as people who are abusing Kratom rather than using it responsibly. But what's responsible use of a substance that causes physical dependence? Where's the line between medicine and addiction? The defensive posture of Kratom advocates also reveals something deeper: cognitive dissonance. People who view themselves as health conscious, who rejected pharmaceuticals in favour of natural alternatives, who pride themselves on being informed, they can't reconcile the idea that Kratom might be harming them. So they double down, insisting it's safe, attacking critics, and surrounding themselves with affirmations. This is similar to patterns seen in other substance use communities. Alcoholics insist alcohol helps them relax and socialize, ignoring the liver damage and broken relationships. Smokers insist cigarettes help them focus and manage stress, ignoring the cancer risk. Kratom users insist it's saving their lives, ignoring the dependence, withdrawal, and escalating doses. The harm reduction versus harm denial distinction is crucial. Harm reduction acknowledges that some drug use is inevitable and aims to minimize negative consequences. It's pragmatic, evidence-based, and non-judgmental. Kratom as a substitute for street opioids can be harm reduction if it's used temporarily, under supervision, with a plan to taper and address underlying issues. Harm denial, in contrast, refuses to acknowledge risks. It insists the substance is safe, minimizes or ignores negative outcomes, and attacks anyone who suggests otherwise. This is what much of the online Kratom community has become, not harm reduction, but harm denial. The Kratom saved my life narrative is often true in a narrow sense, but misleading in a broader context. Yes, Kratom may have prevented someone from overdosing on fentanyl, but if that person is now taking 50 grams of Kratom daily, spending all their money on it, suffering through withdrawal if they miss a dose and unable to function without it, have they really been saved? Or have they just traded one form of dependence for another? True recovery involves addressing the root causes of addiction, trauma, mental health issues, social isolation, lack of purpose. Substituting one substance for another might stabilize someone temporarily, but it's not a solution, it's a band-aid, and Kratom advocates often mistake the band-aid for healing. Not all Kratom vendors are created equal. Some genuinely try to provide quality products and accurate information, but many don't. They cut corners, lie about sourcing, spike products with synthetic compounds, and market to vulnerable populations. There have been cases of vendors selling Kratom laced with tianeptine, a dangerous antidepressant, Finibut, a potent GABAergic, and even synthetic cannabinoids. The industry is the Wild West, and consumers are the guinea pigs. Let's talk about the vendor ecosystem because it ranges from semi-responsible to outright predatory. On one end, you have small vendors who test their products, provide lab results, and try to educate customers about dosing and risks. They're a minority, and even they operate in a grey area because there's no regulatory framework to guide them. On the other end, you have vendors who don't care what they're selling as long as it's profitable. They source the cheapest kratom available, often from questionable suppliers in Indonesia, who mix batches, use old or contaminated product, or adulterate it with fillers. These vendors don't test for purity, alkaloid content, or contaminants. They slap a label on it and sell it. Some vendors engage in outright fraud. They claim their kratom is lab-tested and display certificates of analysis that are either fabricated or based on a single batch that doesn't represent current inventory. They lie about alkaloid content, advertising ultra-premium or high mitragyne kratom that's actually average or below. Others spike their products to make them more potent or distinctive. Adding trianeptine, a pharmaceutical antidepressant banned in several states, creates a more powerful euphoric effect. Users think they've found an exceptionally strong kratom strain when really they're consuming an undisclosed drug. Tianeptine itself is highly addictive and causes severe withdrawal, so now users are dependent on both kratom and tianeptine without knowing it. Phenibut is another common adulterant. It's a GABAergic substance similar to benzodiazepines, legal in the US as a supplement but heavily restricted in other countries because of abuse potential. Adding phenibut to kratom enhances sedative and anxiolytic effects, making the product more appealing. But phenibut causes rapid tolerance and brutal withdrawal. Users become dependent without realizing they're taking anything other than kratom. There have even been reports of synthetic cannabinoids being added to kratom. These are the same compounds found in spice or K2, linked to psychosis, seizures, and deaths. Why would a vendor add synthetic cannabinoids to kratom? To make it stronger, more distinctive, more addictive. They don't care about the consequences, they care about repeat customers and profit. Marketing tactics employed by predatory vendors are also worth examining. They target vulnerable populations, people with chronic pain, recovering addicts, people with mental health issues. They use testimonials, before and after stories, and promises of transformation. They position kratom as a miracle cure while avoiding explicit medical claims that would attract regulatory attention. Some vendors market directly to teenagers and young adults using social media, influencers, and edgy branding. They create TikTok accounts, sponsor YouTube videos, and pay influencers to casually mention kratom in content. The goal is to normalize kratom use among younger demographics who don't understand the risks. Pricing tactics are manipulative. Vendors offer starter packs at low prices to get people hooked, then charge premium prices for regular purchases. They create loyalty programs, subscription services, and bulk discounts that encourage frequent high-volume buying. Customer service from predatory vendors is non-existent. If you complain about contaminated product, adverse reactions, or inconsistent quality, they ignore you or blame you. There's no accountability, no recourse, no way to get a refund or report problems. The online marketplace amplifies these issues. Anyone can set up a kratom website, accept payments, and start shipping product. There's no vetting, no licensing, no barrier to entry. Vendors appear and disappear, rebranding after complaints or legal issues, leaving customers with no way to track quality or hold anyone accountable. Some vendors operate on the dark web or through encrypted messaging apps, selling ultra-concentrated extracts, experimental blends, and adulterated products. These vendors explicitly market to people seeking the strongest possible effects, often people struggling with addiction who are chasing a more intense high. Brick-and-mortar vendors, smoke shops, gas stations, convenience stores often have no idea what they're selling. They buy from distributors who buy from wholesalers who source from overseas suppliers. There's no chain of custody, No verification, no knowledge of what's actually in the product. Store clerks can't answer questions about dosing, risks, or ingredients because they genuinely don't know. And because Kratom is legal and classified as a supplement, there's no regulatory framework to hold any of these vendors accountable. They operate with impunity, selling products that may be contaminated, adulterated, or misrepresented, and facing no consequences unless someone dies, and media attention forces a response. The good vendors, the ones who test products and try to operate ethically, are drowned out by the bad ones. And consumers have no way to tell the difference. They're left to gamble with their health and safety every time they make a purchase. Many people start using Kratom to self-medicate anxiety or depression, and at first, it works. Kratom activates opioid receptors, which can produce feelings of euphoria and calm. But over time, it makes mental health worse. Chronic Kratom use disrupts your brain's natural reward system, leading to anhedonia, inability to feel pleasure, worsened anxiety, and deeper depression. You end up needing Kratom just to feel normal, not better, just baseline. It's a vicious cycle. Let's talk about how this cycle develops, because it's insidious and often invisible until you're deep in it. You're struggling with anxiety, maybe it's social anxiety, maybe it's generalized anxiety disorder, maybe it's just the background stress of modern life. Traditional treatments seem daunting or inaccessible. Therapy is expensive and time-consuming. Medication comes with side effects and stigma. Then you hear about Kratom. It's natural, legal, and people online say it helps with anxiety. You try a small dose and feel better. The edge comes off. Social situations feel manageable. Your racing thoughts slow down. You're calmer, more present, almost normal. It's exactly what you needed. So you start using it regularly. A few times a week becomes daily. One dose becomes 2, then 3. The relief you initially felt starts to fade, not because Kratom stopped working, but because your brain is adapting. Tolerance builds, and you need more to achieve the same effect. But here's what's happening beneath the surface. Kratom is disrupting your brain's natural neurotransmitter balance. Your brain produces its own mood-regulating chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins. When you repeatedly introduce external substances that artificially activate these systems, your brain reduces its own production. Why make endorphins when you're getting them from a plant? This is called downregulation, and it's why chronic Kratom use leads to anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. Activities you used to enjoy feel flat and meaningless. Music doesn't move you. Food tastes bland. Social interactions feel hollow. The only thing that produces any sense of relief or pleasure is Kratom. You're chemically dependent on an external source for feelings that should come naturally. Your anxiety also worsens. This seems contradictory. You started taking Kratom for anxiety, and now your anxiety is worse. But it makes sense neurologically. Kratom provides temporary relief, but when it wears off, your anxiety rebounds even stronger. This is called rebound anxiety, and it's a common feature of substances that affect GABAergic or opioid systems. You're now in a cycle. Take Kratom to relieve anxiety, feel better temporarily, then experience worse anxiety as it wears off, which drives you to take more Kratom. The baseline keeps shifting. You're not managing anxiety anymore. You're just preventing withdrawal-induced anxiety. Depression follows a similar pattern. Kratom provides temporary mood elevation by flooding your brain with dopamine and endorphins, but chronic use depletes your natural reserves. When you're not on Kratom, you feel depressed, sometimes more depressed than you ever felt before you started using it. This is particularly cruel because many people turn to Kratom specifically because they're depressed and can't access mental health treatment. They're seeking relief, and Kratom provides it initially. But over time, it becomes the source of their depression, not the solution. Sleep disturbances compound the problem. Chronic kratom use disrupts sleep architecture. You might fall asleep easily while on kratom, but the quality of sleep is poor. REM sleep is suppressed. You wake up frequently, and when you try to sleep without kratom, insomnia hits hard. Poor sleep worsens anxiety and depression, creating yet another feedback loop. Cognitive function also declines. Chronic kratom users report brain fog, memory issues, and difficulty concentrating. Your mind feels sluggish, like you're thinking through mud. This affects work performance, social interactions, and daily functioning, which increases stress and anxiety, which drives more kratom use. Social isolation is another consequence. You start withdrawing from friends and family because managing relationships feels exhausting. You cancel plans, stop responding to messages, and spend more time alone. Isolation worsens depression, but you don't have the energy or motivation to change it. Financial stress adds to the mental health burden. You're spending hundreds of dollars a month on kratom. Bills pile up. Debt accumulates. The stress of financial instability worsens anxiety, and you cope by taking more kratom. Relationships deteriorate. Partners notice you're different, distant, irritable, secretive. They don't understand why you're always tired, why you disappear to take supplements, why you seem emotionally unavailable. Conflict increases. Some relationships end, adding grief and loss to the mix. All of this creates a downward spiral. You started taking kratom to manage mental health symptoms, but now kratom is causing mental health symptoms. You're trapped in dependence, needing the substance just to maintain a semblance of baseline function, while your underlying issues remain unaddressed and worsening. The cruelest part? Many people don't realize kratom is the problem. They think their anxiety and depression are just getting worse naturally. They don't connect it to kratom because they still think of it as a helpful supplement. So they increase their dose, seeking more relief, which accelerates the downward spiral. Breaking free requires recognizing the cycle, which is hard when you're in it. It requires going through withdrawal, which intensifies anxiety and depression temporarily. It requires addressing the original issues with proper treatment, therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, which feels overwhelming when you're already struggling. Many people attempt to quit kratom multiple times before succeeding, each failed attempt deepening their sense of hopelessness. They believe they're fundamentally broken, that they'll never feel normal again. But the truth is, their brain has been chemically altered by chronic kratom use, and it needs time to heal. Recovery is possible, but it's difficult, and without proper support, many people remain trapped in the cycle, dependent on a substance that promised relief, but delivered only deeper suffering. Kratom has infiltrated workplaces in a way most employers don't realize. Unlike marijuana or alcohol, it doesn't have a distinct smell. It doesn't show up on standard drug tests. Employees can dose throughout the day and nobody knows, but productivity suffers. People nod off in meetings, make mistakes, call in sick during withdrawal, and because it's legal, companies don't know how to address it. Think about your average office, warehouse, or retail environment. Standard drug testing screens for marijuana, cocaine, opioids, amphetamines, and sometimes benzodiazepines. Kratom? Not on the panel. It requires a specialized test that most employers don't even know exists, let alone pay for. So employees using kratom pass drug tests with flying colors while being functionally impaired. The discrete nature of kratom use makes it perfect for workplace consumption. Capsules look like vitamins. Powder can be mixed into coffee or a water bottle. Liquid extracts fit in a pocket and can be consumed in a bathroom stall in seconds. There's no smoke, no smell, no paraphernalia. A co-worker could be dosing kratom right next to you and you'd never know. But the effects are noticeable if you know what to look for. employees using high doses of kratom, especially extracts, experience sedation. They're tired, unfocused, nodding off at their desks. In meetings, they zone out, struggle to follow conversations, and forget what was just discussed. Their reaction time's slow, which is particularly dangerous in jobs involving machinery, driving, or safety-sensitive tasks. Some users dose stimulating strains or lower doses to stay energized, but as tolerance builds, this becomes unsustainable. They need more frequent doses to maintain energy, and eventually they're taking kratom every 2 to 3 hours just to avoid withdrawal and maintain baseline function. The withdrawal issues create another workplace problem. If someone runs out of kratom or forgets their supply, they start going into withdrawal during the workday. Anxiety spikes. They sweat profusely. Muscle aches make sitting or standing uncomfortable. Nausea hits. They're irritable and short-tempered with colleagues. They can't concentrate. Many call in sick, not because they want a day off, but because withdrawal makes working impossible. Absenteeism increases among chronic kratom users. They're calling in sick more frequently, using up PTO, and sometimes losing jobs because of unreliability. Employers notice the pattern but can't pinpoint the cause. It's not alcohol, they'd smell it. Not traditional drugs, they'd fail tests. So what is it? Some employees try to hide their use but make mistakes that reveal it. A coworker finds kratom powder in the break room. Someone notices the same person making frequent bathroom trips. Performance reviews document declining work quality, missed deadlines, errors, lack of focus. In blue-collar jobs, the risks are even higher. Construction workers operating heavy machinery while sedated from kratom extracts. Truck drivers dosing to stay awake, then experiencing unexpected sedation. Warehouse workers making errors that could result in injury. The legal status of kratom creates a dilemma for employers. Can they discipline an employee for using a legal substance? Most employment attorneys say yes, employers can prohibit kratom use just like they can prohibit alcohol use during work hours, even though alcohol is legal. But many employers don't have policies addressing kratom because they're not aware it's an issue. Some industries are starting to catch on. Transportation companies, particularly those regulated by the Department of Transportation, are beginning to include kratom in their drug testing protocols because of safety concerns. A few have implemented policies explicitly prohibiting kratom use. But for most workplaces, kratom remains invisible. Employees are struggling with dependence, dosing throughout the day, suffering through withdrawal, and watching their performance deteriorate, all while HR and management have no idea what's happening. It's a silent epidemic playing out in cubicles, warehouses, and retail floors across America, hidden in plain sight because the substance is legal, and the signs are easy to miss. $15 here, $20 there. It doesn't seem like much. But daily kratom users can easily spend $300 to $500 a month. Some spend more. The financial impact sneaks up on people. They're not buying drugs from a dealer, they're buying supplements from a store. But the debt, the empty bank accounts, the borrowed money, it's all the same. Let's break down the math because it reveals just how expensive kratom dependence becomes. A casual user might buy a small bag of powder once or twice a week, maybe $30 to $50 a month. Manageable. But that's not where most people stay. As tolerance builds and doses increase, so does spending. Someone taking 10 grams per day might go through 100 grams of powder per week. At typical prices, that's $40 to $60 weekly, or about $200 monthly. Still relatively affordable compared to other substance dependencies, which is part of what makes kratom seem benign. But many users don't stick with powder. They move to extracts because they're more convenient, more potent, and provide stronger effects as tolerance builds. This is where costs skyrocket. A single bottle of liquid kratom extract costs $15 to $30 and contains maybe 1 or 2 doses for someone with high tolerance. Users taking extract daily or multiple times daily can easily spend $30 to $60 per day. That's $900 to $1,800 per month. On a substance sold at gas stations. The financial destruction rivals cocaine or heroin addiction. Some users try to manage costs by alternating between powder and extracts, or by buying bulk powder online to reduce per-dose cost. But tolerance keeps climbing, and eventually they're taking 30 to 50 grams of powder daily, plus occasional extract shots. The bulk savings disappear as quantity increases. Online vendors offer deals, buy 3 kilograms, get 1 free, and users convince themselves they're saving money. They spend $200 at once, justifying it as an investment. But they blow through it faster than expected, then place another order, then another. The subscriptions and loyalty programs become automatic monthly charges they can't afford to cancel because they need the Kratom. Credit card debt accumulates. Users max out cards buying Kratom, then open new cards. They take out payday loans. They borrow from friends and family, usually with vague excuses, car repair, medical bills, helping someone out. The shame of admitting they're spending hundreds on Kratom keeps them lying. Bills go unpaid, rent is late, utilities get shut off warnings, they skip meals to afford Kratom, they stop contributing to savings, retirement accounts get drained, financial stability evaporates, all for a substance that's supposed to be a harmless supplement. The insidious part is how gradual the financial destruction feels. It's not one catastrophic expense, it's death by 1,000 small purchases. $15 here doesn't feel significant, but $15 daily is $450 monthly, $5,400 annually, for a substance that provides no lasting benefit and creates dependence. Some users work extra hours or take second jobs just to afford their Kratom habit. They're exhausted, running on fumes, sacrificing time with family and hobbies, all to fund a dependency they never meant to develop. The irony is brutal, working more to buy more Kratom to have energy to work more. Relationships suffer when finances do. Partners discover the spending and react with anger, betrayal, and confusion. You spent how much on what becomes a recurring fight. Joint accounts are drained. Trust evaporates. Some couples separate over financial infidelity related to Kratom. Users start hiding purchases. They use cash to avoid paper trails. They have Kratom shipped to work or to friends' houses. They delete confirmation emails and clear browser history. The secrecy and deception mirror patterns seen in gambling or substance addiction. The financial impact extends beyond direct Kratom costs. Lost productivity at work leads to missed promotions or job loss. Medical bills accumulate from Kratom-related health issues. Legal costs arise if they're caught with Kratom in states where it's banned. Car payments are missed, leading to repossession. The cascading financial consequences can take years to recover from, if ever. And here's the cruelest part. When users finally decide to quit, they can't afford proper treatment or support. Therapy is expensive. Residential rehab programs cost thousands. They're stuck trying to quit alone, while broke, stressed, and overwhelmed by the financial wreckage Kratom created. Kratom addiction doesn't happen in a vacuum. Partners watch as their loved ones change, withdrawn, irritable, secretive. Parents find Kratom powder hidden in their teenager's room. Spouses discover thousands of dollars gone. The shame and secrecy create distance. And because it's just Kratom, people don't take it seriously until it's too late. Let's start with romantic relationships, because Kratom dependence destroys them in predictable ways. At first, the partner who's using might seem better, less anxious, more social, happier. The other partner doesn't realize Kratom is involved. They're just glad their loved one seems improved. But as dependence develops, personality changes become obvious. The Kratom user becomes irritable, especially when they're approaching their next dose or running low on supply. Small annoyances trigger disproportionate reactions. They snap at their partner over nothing, then apologize, then do it again. Emotional availability disappears. Kratom users describe feeling emotionally numb, less connected to their partners, less interested in intimacy. Sex drive often decreases, which creates tension and feelings of rejection. The non-using partner feels abandoned, confused about what changed. The secrecy is corrosive. Kratom users hide their use, lie about money, and create elaborate cover stories. They sneak doses in the bathroom, pretend to be going to the store when they're really buying Kratom, and delete evidence of purchases. The deception feels necessary because they're ashamed, but it destroys trust. When the non-using partner discovers the truth through a bank statement, finding hidden stashes, or confronting the user, the revelation is devastating. It's not just about the substance, it's about the lying, the money, the realization that their partner has been living a secret life. Arguments become explosive. The non-using partner demands the user quit. The user promises to stop, then doesn't. Or they quit briefly, go through brutal withdrawal and relapse. Each broken promise deepens resentment and hopelessness. The non-using partner cycles through anger, bargaining, and grief. Some relationships survive if the user commits to recovery and the partner commits to supporting them, but many don't. The trust is too damaged, the financial strain too severe, the emotional exhaustion too overwhelming. They separate, often with the Kratom user still in active addiction, now alone and sinking deeper. For families with children, the impact is even more devastating. Parents using Kratom are less present, less engaged. Kids notice mum or dad is always tired, always irritable, always locked in the bathroom. Family activities stop happening. The addicted parent misses school events, forgets important conversations, and emotionally withdraws. Teenagers are particularly vulnerable to discovering and using their parents' Kratom. They see it in the house, hear it's natural and safe, and try it themselves. Now you've got a parent and child both dependent, both hiding it from each other, both suffering. Some parents lose custody when their Kratom use is discovered, especially if they're using extracts heavily, or if there's evidence of impairment around children. Child Protective Services gets involved, courts get involved, and families are torn apart over a substance sold legally at gas stations. Extended family relationships suffer too. Parents of the Kratom user watch helplessly as their adult child destroys their life. They offer support, money, a place to stay, all of which enables continued use. They don't know how to help because Kratom isn't widely recognized as a serious addiction. They feel stuck between abandoning their child and enabling self-destruction. Siblings become frustrated, angry at watching their brother or sister throw their life away. Family gatherings become tense. People avoid the topic or confront it aggressively. Either way, relationships fracture. The shame keeps families silent. They don't talk about it outside the family because it feels embarrassing. My loved one is addicted to Kratom. What even is that? They can't relate to other families dealing with addiction because Kratom isn't recognized the same way heroin or alcohol is. And because Kratom is legal, intervention feels complicated. You can't force someone into rehab for using a legal supplement, even when it's clearly destroying them and everyone around them. Families feel powerless, watching someone they love spiral while having no recourse. The cumulative toll on relationships is staggering. Marriages end. Parent-child bonds fracture. Friendships dissolve. Extended family support evaporates. The Kratom user ends up isolated, surrounded by people who've given up or been pushed away. using Kratom partly to numb the pain of loneliness that Kratom itself created. When someone wants to quit opioids, there are resources, rehab centers, medication-assisted treatment, support groups. But for Kratom, almost nothing. It's not taken seriously by the medical community. Insurance doesn't cover treatment. There's no Suboxone equivalent. People are left to quit alone, suffering through withdrawal with nothing but Reddit threads and sheer willpower. Let's talk about what happens when someone finally decides to quit Kratom. First, they're usually hitting rock bottom, financially broke, relationships destroyed, health deteriorating. They've tried to quit multiple times and failed. Each failed attempt has deepened their sense of hopelessness and shame. So they gather their courage and decide to try again. Maybe they tell their partner or a friend. Maybe they just decide quietly. Either way, they're about to face withdrawal with almost no support. They search online for help. Google Kratom addiction treatment, and you'll find not much. A few private rehab centers that charge tens of thousands of dollars. Some mention Kratom in passing as something they treat alongside other addictions, but there's no Kratom-specific programming. Most addiction treatment centers haven't even heard of Kratom. They call their doctor. The conversation is awkward and often unhelpful. Many doctors don't know what Kratom is. Those who do often don't take it seriously. It's just a supplement, right? Can't you just stop taking it? They don't understand dependence, don't recognize withdrawal symptoms, and can't offer medical support. Some doctors are sympathetic but helpless. They want to help but don't know how. There's no established protocol for Kratom withdrawal, no medication specifically approved for it. They might offer clonidine for symptom management or refer to addiction services. But those services often reject Kratom users because they only treat real drugs. Insurance is useless. Kratom isn't recognized as a substance use disorder in most insurance systems. Claims for treatment are denied. Even if a doctor prescribes comfort medications for withdrawal symptoms, insurance might not cover them if the indication is Kratom withdrawal. Medication-assisted treatment, the gold standard for opioid addiction, doesn't exist for Kratom in any standardized form. Some doctors will prescribe Suboxone, buprenorphine, to help Kratom users transition off, but it's controversial and not widely accepted. Suboxone is itself an opioid, creating dependency, so it's trading one substance for another, though arguably a safer, more controllable one. Other doctors refuse to prescribe Suboxone for Kratom users, saying Kratom doesn't qualify as an opioid use disorder, or they're afraid of liability. So users are stuck in limbo, too sick for outpatient counseling to be effective, but unable to access medication support that might make quitting possible. Support groups are hit or miss. Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous will accept Kratom users, but the fit is often awkward. Old-timers in these programs sometimes dismiss Kratom as not a real drug, making users feel invalidated. The abstinence-only approach can be helpful, but doesn't address the specific challenges of Kratom withdrawal. Online support is the most accessible, but also the most inconsistent. Reddit's r/quitting Kratom is active and supportive, full of people sharing timelines, symptoms, and encouragement. But it's also full of people relapsing, struggling for months or years, and documenting their suffering in real time. It's helpful but also demoralizing to see how hard it is and how often people fail. Some users try to taper gradually, reducing their dose over weeks or months. This works for some but requires incredible discipline that most people in active addiction don't have. The temptation to take just a little extra is constant, especially during stressful moments. Many taper attempts fail, leaving users feeling like they can't even quit the right way. Cold turkey quitting is brutal. Acute withdrawal lasts 5 to 7 days of hell, sweating, insomnia, muscle aches, nausea, anxiety, depression. then weeks or months of post-acute withdrawal with cravings, fatigue and anhedonia. Most people can't function during acute withdrawal, but they can't take time off work because they've already used all their sick days during their addiction. The lack of social support is crushing. Friends and family don't understand why it's so hard to quit a supplement. They don't get why someone is bedridden, crying in pain over something they bought at a gas station. The invalidation makes the suffering worse. Relapse rates are high because the barriers to accessing Kratom are so low. It's sold everywhere. You can order it online and have it delivered. There's no dealer to avoid, no inconvenience. When withdrawal becomes unbearable, relief is just a short drive or a few clicks away. And when people do relapse, and most do, multiple times, they're devastated. They feel like failures. They've let down their loved ones, wasted another opportunity, proved they're weak. The shame deepens, making it harder to try again. The medical community's dismissiveness is particularly cruel. People suffering from Kratom dependence are treated like they're making a big deal out of nothing. They're told to just stop, to have willpower, to not be dramatic. But their suffering is real. The withdrawal is real, the dependence is real, and the lack of support makes recovery nearly impossible. So tonight, as you drift off in your clean bed with access to health care, regulated medications, and the luxury of knowing exactly what's in the substances you consume, maybe take a moment to consider the Kratom users who don't have that clarity. The people who walked into a gas station looking for energy or pain relief and walked out with a dependency they never saw coming. This isn't ancient history or a distant epidemic happening to other people. This is happening right now in your town, probably within a mile of where you're listening. Kratom is sitting on shelves next to beef, jerky and lottery tickets, marketed as wellness, sold without warnings, and creating a generation of people dependent on a substance the medical system doesn't know how to treat, and society doesn't take seriously. The cruel irony of Kratom is that it promised to be the solution, a natural alternative to dangerous pharmaceuticals, a legal way to manage pain when doctors wouldn't help, a bridge away from harder drugs, and for some people it was those things, at least temporarily. But for many more, it became the problem. Another substance, another dependency, another trap disguised as salvation. We've been here before. We've watched industries prioritize profits over people. Regulators hesitate while bodies pile up, and communities suffer in silence because the drug is too new, too legal, too misunderstood to warrant action. The opioid crisis taught us nothing, apparently, because we're doing it all again with a different plant and better marketing. The Kratom epidemic is still unfolding. The ending hasn't been written yet. Will we regulate responsibly? Will we offer treatment? Will we learn from our mistakes? Or will we just watch this play out the same way every American drug crisis plays out, with too little action, too late, and too many casualties? Right now, someone is taking their first dose of Kratom, believing it's safe because it's legal, natural and sold at a store. They have no idea what they're starting. They don't know about tolerance, dependence or withdrawal. They don't know about the Reddit threads filled with people desperate to quit, the relationships destroyed, the money drained, the lives derailed. And maybe that's the saddest part of this whole epidemic. It's completely preventable. Simple regulations, honest labeling, age restrictions, quality testing, basic measures could prevent so much suffering. But those measures require admitting there's a problem, and America has never been good at that until the crisis is undeniable. So here we are, in the early chapters of another preventable disaster, watching it unfold in slow motion while arguing about freedom, nature, and personal responsibility. Meanwhile, people are suffering, alone, ashamed, and unable to get help for an addiction to something they bought next to the Slim Jims. Tonight, as you fall asleep, Kratom will be creating new dependencies, deepening existing ones, and sitting on shelves waiting for the next person desperate enough to try it. The epidemic grows quietly, one gas station purchase at a time, in a country that somehow still hasn't figured out that legal doesn't mean safe, natural doesn't mean harmless, and available doesn't mean acceptable. Sleep well. The Kratom industry is counting on you not paying attention. They're counting on the medical system staying confused, on regulators moving slowly, on the public remaining ignorant. They're counting on this epidemic staying invisible just a little bit longer, just long enough to make a few more $1 billion while people's lives fall apart. Because history may be full of preventable tragedies, but it's also proof that we're remarkably good at repeating them, especially when there's money to be made and the victims are too ashamed to speak up. Sweet dreams.